our first interview. I can't get back there. Okay. Is there a way to turn these up? Okay. Is that better? That's okay. Great. Again, we welcome you to our first interview. I would like to introduce you to our first candidate that we have, Dr. Regina Thomson. Dr. Thomson, I would like to introduce you to the members of the board, okay? To my left, your right, we have Ms. Kelly Cochran, Pastor Andre Huff, Dr. Wayne Watts, Ms. Nancy Stewart, Mr. Frank Kyler, and Mr. Mike Haney. Okay? All of us will have questions that we will be answering, asking the candidate, and she will respond. I feel kind of awkward because I'm not used to my back being to y'all, but I think y'all want to see her more. You want to see me anyway, okay? Again, thank you all for coming, and I want a special thanks to the mayor's office for providing the taping of the interviews and making them available on Channel 99. That's a big plus. So if you have people who are interested and they could not make it for whatever reason, just let them know that they will be able to have access to each of the interviews, okay? Okay. We will get started. I'm going to ask everyone, because I think this is always appropriate. I'm going to ask everyone to stand and let's pray. Okay. Father God, we thank you for this day, Lord. We thank you for life, for health, and for strength. We thank you for our Gadsden City School System, the students, the faculty, the staff, the parents, the whole village, Lord. We thank you. And Father God, as we go forward through this interview process, Lord, allow us to hear what we need to hear. Allow us to make the decisions that are best for all of the children in this system, Lord God. This is our prayer in the name of Jesus. And we thank you, Lord. We love you and we exalt you. Amen. Amen. Dr. Thomson. Before we start the actual questions, I want to give you an opportunity to tell us a little bit about yourself. Okay?
Can you hear me? Anyone? Is the mic on?
Take the mic. So, yeah. It's on.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Well, good evening.
Good evening.
First of all, I want to thank everyone. I want to make special greetings to the board and thank you for inviting me out today. I really am thankful and humble about the invitation to President Dr. Deborah Howard, Vice President Dr. Wayne Watts, as well as board member Ms. Kelly Cochran, board member Mr. Frank Seiler, board member Mr. Mike Haney, board member Reverend Z. Andre Huff, and board member Ms. Nancy Stewart. I want to personally thank you for the invitation. It has really been an honor. I would like to also thank you all for the wonderful tour today. It was really pleasant. Going to the schools were just really so inviting. It reminds me of why I'm in this profession. Being able to always be able to step into the school really kind of exhilarates me because I can really see what's happening with the children. I can see what the administrators and leaders are doing. Being able to just talk to them is just so exciting. So I really want to thank them as well for inviting me into your schools to be a part of your part of your faculty today, a member. I also want to thank the mayor, Mayor Sherman Guyton, and as well as his assistant, Mr. Frankie Davis, for having me in today as well, and the kind words of what the expectations are all about. Kind of open up the door to kind of hear exactly what we really are striving for as a union and as a team, and that's what is so important. How do we build partnerships? How do we work together as one to make sure everything benefits the best for our students and what happens there? A little bit about me. Just being back in Alabama is fun. This is my home for over 50 years. This is where Birmingham, Alabama was my home. I did a lot of my work in Montgomery, Alabama. I think about, you're looking at a person who natural inheritance is to lead. I'm a natural born leader. For some time, for some people this may seem cliche, but my leadership story is really pretty vast. When you think about the reality of my first career choice, which was business, and I stepped into business really thinking that's what I wanted because all of my family were educators. My mom, my grandmother, and everyone. And I really thought that's what I wanted. So I was a top executive with Blue Cross Blue Shield in Birmingham, Alabama for years. Well, immediately I pursued to go back and further my education, and I began to find my love in what God really destined me to be, and that was a true educator as well as a leader. When I was working at Blue Cross, I found that my niche for leading was always evident. It was always within me. I just had to really pull it out and make it really evident. So stepping into education really kind of like broadened my horizon, allowed me to actually know that the servant leader that I am was all about giving, and that I had something to give, and that's what it was all about. My career started out at Blue Cross, then I advanced, and now my education went on, and I acquired my BS from Birmingham Southern University, Birmingham Southern College. And from there, I was a teacher with Homewood City Schools. And I worked with Homewood City Schools for about 6 years as a teacher. I advanced from second grade to fifth grade teacher, and then my principal just came to me and told me that they were looking at me really to be part of their leadership team. And from there, they sponsored several of the faculty and staff there to go back to school, and that's how I ended up at Sanford University. And so from Sanford, a cohort attended Sanford, and we went to Sanford and obtained my master's, my education specialist degree, as well as my doctorate. And so I ended up being an employee with Sanford. The dean, Dr. Ruth Ash, asked if I would come and consider working with them. And so I worked with Dr. Ruth Ash at Sanford University as an assistant professor, as well as a coordinator of early childhood for about 3 years. But that wasn't enough for me. I was still up under the umbrella of Homewood City Schools, and I knew in my heart I wanted to lead. I knew public school was really something I still was striving for. By this time, it was in my blood. It was what I wanted to do. And so I stepped out, even though I was in a leadership position being over early childhood, I stepped out and pursued a principalship, and I became a principal. And from there, leadership just kind of went from there. I was a leader, principal with Montgomery Public Schools for approximately 6 years. I took a school that was in school improvement for approximately 8 years, E.D. Nixon Elementary, and we took that school in about 2.5, 3 years, and took it to the horizon of being one of the top schools of Alabama. It was a lot of work, a lot of research, a lot of consistent efforts had to come forth, but it happened. We hired good staff. They were in place. And so from there, the superintendent saw something in me, and that's how I started my central office work. Mr. Dilworth came and asked me if I would interview for a position for deputy superintendent. So I was interim deputy superintendent with Montgomery Public Schools for 1.5 years, and then he transitioned back to Louisiana. At that time, I went to Lowndes County, and so when I was in Lowndes County, I was director over curriculum and instruction as well as Title I. And so during that time, I was able to write a grant for $14 million. I partnered with the consultant service, and this school district was in a rural county, needed a lot of help, a lot of nurturing, and we joined together with this company and wrote a grant for $14 million. It was a school improvement grant. We were awarded the grant, and we took off. Improvement started from there. And then I transitioned to Kansas City, Missouri as an assistant superintendent, where I oversaw schools, mainly another transformation plan. The superintendent saw something in me that I could really help the schools excel. They had closed about 20 schools of 60, and so they were dealing with a lot of cultural issues and things that had to happen. So during that time, I had to really kind of step in, work with building the morale with the faculty and staff, with the principals as well. And so I stayed there for a few years, and then I ended up in Columbia, South Carolina, where I am now. I've been the chief of teaching and learning, where I oversee, I want to say, about 8 different departments, including now special education, professional development, Title I, the list goes on and on, curriculum and instruction, executive directors of schools. All of those individuals came up under me. I've been in South Carolina over 5 years now. This is going to my 6th year, and I'm now executive director of dimensional leadership, where I do consultant work for colleges and different individuals that needs coaching for their teachers. And so that's a little bit about me. I'm married. I have 3 children from the ages of 36 to 31. I have 2 grandchildren, wonderful girls, one graduating from high school this year and then another next year. And I would love the opportunity to be able to come back to Sweet Home, Alabama, because that's where my roots are.
Thank you. Mr. Haney, I believe you have the first question.
Yes, ma'am. Dr. Thomson, these are the first questions you'll get are the questions that I think you were stating, the stock questions, if you will, that, so we're just reading these, and then once these are completed, I have some additional questions.
That would be fine.
Just wanted to let you know what's going on, okay?
Okay, thank you.
The first stock question is, what do you see as the role of the superintendent as it relates to employee groups, students, and the community and the Board of Education?
When I think about the role of the superintendent, I think about, first of all, being a leader, someone that has a vision, who can take a vision and take it forward. When you think about working with the employees, I really kind of get deep into working and building rapport with employees, involvement in decision making based on data. I'm really a collaborative leader. Anyone that works with me, and I still get calls now from individuals that desire to be under me because I involve them. I make sure that they are part of the decision making. I'm a team builder. I feel that when employees work for me, they feel like they're part of the team. They're not isolated from the team. Another thing that employees can think of me, when I think of employees, I think about increasing student learning. My expectations are high. I am a transformational leader. That is who I am. A lot of times when people request for me to do work for them, it's all about transformational services. It's mainly because a lot of our schools sometimes are struggling with academics, and so I can go in and kind of help build that rapport. Holding individuals, holding the employees that work for me accountable is good, but one thing about it, I take care of my employees. I do. They know it because when I ask them to do something, they do not mind doing it, mainly because I'm going to make sure that they have everything that they need to be successful, really alluding to that they will do everything they can to make sure students are successful. When I think about students, it's all about hiring good leaders. We have to have good leaders in place to make sure the leaders are in place to help our students, to make sure that our students are successful. We have to have good employees in place as well. So I will make sure that the students have everyone in place that will really help them to be successful, as well as engaging and involving them in their learning process. That is a key component. Moving on to the community, I really think about involvement, really involving them. I have worked mostly at all school districts, rural, suburban, and urban. But urban has really been one of the school districts that I have done most of my work in, out of all of the experiences that I've had. And one thing I find is with the community, they want to be a part of their child's education. Parents do. The community want to be a part because they feel that partnering with the school district will help build the community. So I believe in involving them and making them a part of the community and a part of the educational process and what needs to happen. So that's very important to me as well. So when I think about all of that, everyone is essential to the process of educating our students, and that involvement is really important.
The follow-up question to that is, why do you want to come to Gadsden?
Well, Most of my experience has been in areas like Gadsden. I worked in Lowndes County, I worked in Montgomery Public Schools, and now I'm in Columbia. If you look at the demographics of those school districts, they mirror Gadsden, but it's also, Gadsden is in Alabama. It brings me back home. It brings me back closer to where my roots are. And I, have researched the area. I'm very familiar with it. The existence of being able to work with the community as Gadsden, building it on the community, helping the community build through the school district is really important. So that's another reason I would like to be part of Gadsden School District.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Dr. Thomson, we have 5 quality founders. Why should the board select you?
Yes, you have 5 finalists, but I will say that my experience extends way beyond probably a lot of the individuals that you will be interviewing. I have an extensive amount of qualifications in leadership, leadership training, collaborative leadership, building teams, working with teams, working closely with boards. I'm known for working with boards and bringing them together. Also working with boards and actually letting them know the transparency of what is happening in the school district. I'm transparent, I'm collaborative, and so those are some of the things I bring. My experience is really vast. I have a lot of curriculum and instruction experience as far as moving schools, but I also have experience with rapport, how my interpersonal skills, how I have worked in suburban schools, rural schools, and urban schools. Out of all the schools I've worked in, my rapport and interpersonal skills have been the highlight of what I do. And so when I think about that and what I can bring to a district, that will really outshine probably many people. I don't know the candidates personally, but I do know my experience and what my experience entail, and that's really been a strong leader and a leader that has experience as well as in strategic planning. I also work with advanced ed in reviewing schools. That is something I've done. I've worked with advanced ed in Alabama, but I also have worked with advanced ed in South Carolina as well. So my experience really kind of extends beyond to be able to really qualify me for the position of Superintendent of Gadsden City Schools.
Ms. Thompson, what steps would you take to create a culture of learning and high expectations among the employees in our school system?
For one, I would really think about, when I first come into a district, I come to listen and learn. It's not about really changing a lot at the beginning, because you have to listen and you have to learn from individuals. And so when I think about the culture and think about the culture of learning and trying to build that culture of learning, when we come into education, we come in to serve anyway. That's what our role is. And so what we want to do is ensure that everyone is here for the same purpose, and that's for educating students. And that everyone really believes that all students can be educated and all students can learn. That is the key. So when you think about that being the key component, building the culture is really setting the expectations out there, letting everybody know exactly what the expectations are, and that is about educating students. And when they begin to really see that we're all here for the same reason, the same purpose, and we all work together as a team, the culture and the morale will build. Individuals that work for you, they really tend to know that they know that you're inclusive, that they are inclusive in the decision making, and that you're not top down trying to make decisions. They are more persuasive to work with you. And that's what I'm about. I'm about being a collaborative leader, helping individuals understand their purpose and their role in the organization, making sure that they know what the expectations are up front. There are no hidden secrets in educating our students. There is nothing that I really hold back. I make sure that it's all laid out. I am a paper pencil person. I make sure everything is written. Most of the times when I go into districts, I really write plans. I'm known for writing models. I've written school improvement models. I've written transformation models. I've also written a literacy plan. All of those things are written because if they say, or the individuals, employees who work for me say, how can we do something? I'm going to make sure they have everything they can to do it. So there will not be any reason to say they can't do it. And that would be the main thing.
Thank you.
How have your previous experiences prepared you to be the superintendent in this system? You've already touched on some of that, I think.
I have, but I don't mind. I'll continue. I would say that being an educational leader is something that, you can either be trained to be an educator, be a leader, or you can be born to be a leader. And I would say that I'm a born leader. I spoke of all of my family members who were principals, superintendents, ran businesses and all of that. But when I think of, really my preparation, it was more so that I was born to be a leader. And so when I think about those leadership roles and the roles of a superintendent, they all fall into line to what I've experienced. I've taken on higher assignments to make sure I was prepared. I have held almost every position in central office except for chief of operations. I've worked in human resources. I've worked with human resources very detailed because I had to hire a lot of employees. But I've been over Title I. I've overseen special ed. I've done curriculum and instruction. I've been a principal. And foremost, I've been a teacher. And I also taught at the college level. So I know exactly what students need. I've supervised student teachers. I've supervised those individuals that work with student teachers. So when you think about that and all of that experience, I come to the table with a lot of experience that will help this school district and all school districts be able to move forward because of the experience that I bring forward. I did not just walk in from a principalship. I did not just walk in from a central office position, but I was a teacher, and I know what the teacher's role is. I know what the principal's role is. I know what it is to be a deputy. I know what it is to be assistant superintendent over schools. I know what the principal feels when the executive director comes into their school listening with high expectations. I know all of those different roles because I've held them. I am not just saying I read about them. I'm not book sense only, but I'm also about experience. I walk the road of really being the superintendent for Gadsden City Schools.
Dr. Thomson, describe how you would obtain support from the Board of Education for candidates you intend to recommend for employment.
When I think about it, and I'm smiling because I hire for keeps, for retention. I have a very strategic way that I hire individuals. And the reason I do that is because I do a lot of research. When I interview with my employees, I can sit in the room and they would interview the candidate, and I would be sitting there and they would be discussing me. Our supervisor expects this. Our principal expects this. Because like I said, I'm very transparent. Can you get to work on time? Because our principal, our superintendent, or our assistant superintendent feels everyone needs to be accountable for and be here in order to teach our children. And so when I do that, I've done the homework on the candidate. I have researched the candidate. I first of all want to know, yes, you can be on the bus, but can you be in the right seat on the bus? That's important. Because sometimes we hire individuals, and we just place them, but they may not be in the right seat. And so my key is that I always do the research and say, okay, are you really good for that position? So I do all of that homework before I even bring it to the board. So when the board really receives that information, they're looking at the information wholeheartedly, understanding that the homework has already been done. There will not be a lot of questions because it would all be in black and white, exactly what that candidate brings to the table, what they can do, and why they are selected for the position they have been selected for.
Thank you.
Dr. Thomson, discuss the most difficult personnel problems you have ever dealt with and how you received it.
Okay. I would say when I was a principal, you have candidates that sometimes, employees that you inherit when you walk into any organization or any situation. And I would say that as a principal walking into a failing school that had been failing for 8 years or more, and everyone was doing the same old, and the students were still struggling. Parents were at a point they didn't know what to do, and personnel, the employees were just at a status quo status. They were just there. And so I had to deal with that head on. And I had to make sure that they understood what the expectations were and that students had to learn. Yes, students were going to start reading on the third day of school. No, you were not going to, talk about, I need to first tell them how to sit down. No, we're going to start teaching immediately. And so because of those high expectations, sometimes employees are used to doing it the way they're accustomed to doing it. And so I had to set the expectations high. And when they said they couldn't do it, I trained because I am an expert trainer. I've trained with Stanford University. I've trained with other organizations that really kind of sets the stage for exactly what needs to happen in the educational system. And so when that happens, I just set up everything, and my faculty meetings turned to training sessions. And so I dealt with those employees that could not meet the expectations. And either you could be trained up or you could be trained out. And so that's what ended up happening. But at the end of the day, most of them just needed to be trained. Because what I'm about is hiring people that can be trained. And if I am here and knowing that I am a trainer, I'm going to make sure that they're trained. Those that did not want to be trained, I didn't even have to really release them. They ended up retiring because they knew that it was not really the position for them. And I had some individuals that say, I did not know it was going to be like this. Because sometimes you are not in the right seat on the bus. And so you realize it, but no one has helped you to actually come to what the vision is that you need to be, so you can be the true servant leader that you need to be, and not really threaten the education of students at the same time. So really that was one situation where I really had problems with personnel. Other than that, when we get the right people on the bus, I don't really usually have too many problems with personnel.
Dr. Thompson, what are your expectations for student achievement?
Consistency. Every position I've held has been really set around being consistent. My successes, the successes of the organizations that I work for, the successes for the students and the teachers, because teachers and faculty, they like to be successful as well. It's all because I'm consistent with what I do. And when I say I'm consistent, I set the stage up front. I inform them of what is needed and what needs to happen. We have professional learning community meetings, but they are aligned to a real true school improvement plan. Like I reviewed the plan here for Gadsden City School. A lot of things are in place, but we have to make sure that we're consistent in the processes. Because what happens is that as we begin to review all the different things that we're putting in place, what teachers need to know and principals and administrators need to know is that, okay, how do we make sure the action is there to make it happen? And so with student achievement, that is what really needs to happen. We need to constantly review the data. I have meetings normally, my PLCs are on every level, at the district level, at the school level, as well as at the school level, at the teacher level. So it's on every level. All my different departments, they also have PLCs because they have to look at the data, so when they come together with me, they can be able to explain why things are happening that we have reviewed 6 weeks prior. So when we set it up that way, and we're constantly reviewing the data, and we're not talking about just data, we're looking at teacher retention, we're looking at behavior data, we're looking at how well students behave with certain teachers. How is the leadership there? How is parental involvement there? How many community stakeholders do they have in place? We look at all that type of data. We take I do surveys, and when we come together for those PLCs, that data is on boards all across the room. I have a data room, and most of the time that is one thing I make sure we set up. And in that data room, we're actually reviewing a ton of different type of data pieces. And when we look at that, we're all looking at it together. So it's not like I'm top down telling you that you need to do X, Y, and Z, but you actually are watching it and looking at it with me and saying, you're wondering what's happening. As a principal, the teachers were coming into and I would call out a student's name because I believe in calling out students because they are individual. And they would say, I knew you were going to ask me about him. I knew you were. And I would say, yes, because I reviewed and studied him all night long and trying to figure out why is he not moving. And so I do the same thing at the district level. I look at third grade, I look at second grade. Why is second grade not moving? Then I do an audit on our resources. I do resource audits all the time, mainly to see if we're using them to fidelity, mainly to see if what we're doing is really working, if that program is really working for the students that we're teaching. Sometimes some programs do not work with the clientele that we have. And so I do all type of audits on resources, I do surveys on our community, on the teachers, to make sure everything is in place. And so that's one way I really look at student achievement and excelling.
Do you believe that all children can learn at high levels?
I do. I took a school that was in a high poverty-stricken area. 3 project areas fed into that one school. And we turned that school around in about less than 3 years, and we held it that way. Senators from Washington came down to visit because the data was consistent all the way across the board. It had never happened before. They knew there was nothing done out of the ordinary because of the way the data read. If you were going to do something misleading, it wouldn't have happened on all 3 pieces. People from the State Department, we became a model school. We had bus loads coming monthly to actually see what our research was and what we were doing. So I know, not believe, but I know all students can learn. And it has been proven effectively all the time.
Eliminating the achievement gap is a moral commandment. What approaches will you pursue specifically addressing the middle population of students?
When I think of the middle population of students, I think about those students who are right in the middle. They are either, if you don't watch them, they can go down and be below average, or if you really push them, they can go up to be high. And so when I think about those students, I really try to work with them and really figure out what their learning style is. Because a lot of times what we find is that our schools or our teachers or our faculty and staff, they tend to work with the low performing. The high performing end up going off to a gifted teacher or someone else. That middle group is the ones that are always really on that fence rocking, wondering which way could they go if we just let up a little bit. So what I always do is try to make sure that those students are sound, that their education is sound, that what they're doing is sound. I believe in standards-based instruction and student-centered learning. When I walk in, that's the first thing I look at is the setup of the classroom. Is it student-centered? Is it all about the kids, or is it really about the teacher? And so those students really, their assignments have to be lined up and set aside to make sure that they are not the ones that are going to tilt over and become the low-performing students. So I treat them as if, almost make sure that their instructional strategies are almost as detailed as the low-performing students. That's the main thing that I do, to make sure that they do not tilt the scale. And so when I work with faculty and staff, they don't understand that, because they're thinking they only need to work with the low-performing students because those kids are doing pretty well. But those students, you have to really show them the data that those students fluctuate up and down quite a bit, because they either can go down to the low end of the bar, or they can rise up to the high. And so those are the ones you have to pay attention to, just like you with the low-performing students.
I think this is the last part of my question. What leadership and guidance would you provide to ensure that these approaches are properly evaluated and adjusted over time to meet changing student needs?
One would be what I've discussed, professional learning communities. That would be something that I would do, monitor. I do a lot of monitoring, and I really perform that, like I said, on every department level. So those would be some of the things that I would have in place to make sure that all the things that I discussed are consistent. They are in place, they are workable. And then what we do, we change immediately. We do not wait until we get test scores back from the state. We use our own results. And we set up, most of the districts I work for, we set up assessments from the district level. And then the school also has assessment, and we build it around how the children are going to be assessed. The key is that we don't want to set students up for failure. But I don't believe in setting teachers up for failure either. I'm very strong about that. Everybody wants to be on a winning team. And so what I have found is we can show quick successes, then people begin to believe. Because what you want to happen is that you want everyone that works for you to believe just like you believe. That all students can learn. But sometimes you have to show individuals that. And you have to really prove it to them. And I know that's sad to say, but it's true. And so the key is to make sure you do quick wins right away on data, and you begin to show them the strategies that were used and how you use those and how you use them to make sure students excel. And then from there, teachers can see their successes, ultimately seeing students' successes.
Thank you.
You need to take a break and have a swallow of water. Yes, ma'am. We're committed to closing achievement gaps and dramatically increasing our graduation rate. Please describe any successes you've had in these areas and how you accomplished these goals here.
Okay. Well, one I discussed with Edie Nixon, but now I want to go a little deeper. I want to talk about since I've been at the district level. When I think about successes, in South Carolina, we started, the state mandated that everyone had to have a reading certification, even administrators, because our students they were scoring so low on reading. And so we knew something was wrong with this. We knew that something had to happen, not just receiving a certification wasn't enough. I mean, anyone can go back to school and get a certification, but the key was that we had to train them. And we had to make sure that was done. So what we did, we redesigned our literacy program. We wrote a literacy platform. And what that did, that really kind of laid out student project-based, student-centered literacy plan that really allowed for reading to be fun. So reading could be exciting. Because sometimes when you're working with various diverse clientele, you find that, by the time students get to the 3rd and 4th grade, reading is no longer fun anymore. And so we had to really figure out and create a way that we really could bring reading back to the forefront of everything that we did. So we built reading around every content area, science, social studies. It was built into math. It was built into everything. So this isn't anything new to a lot of educators who are present tonight. But it was something that we had to lay out that was a student-centered way where students could actually choose their path on how they read, on the reading materials that they worked with. And that was something that we did. The work that I did that happened at E.D. Nixon was great. It was exuberating to be able to take a school that low and move it up. But it was also exuberating to have a principal to come in behind me, and if he followed the same structure, it stayed the same way. And that's what happened. They still have some of the same staff there. So I still go back to being consistent with what we do and how you do it, and make sure you're monitoring. When you think about graduation rate, I don't use the word tracking, but you have to monitor every child that comes in at 9th grade, and you have to ensure that that child graduates on time. And that is a tool that I have used across the board. I work a lot with the counselors. I work a lot with the principals. And so when you're talking about student achievement and accelerating the graduation rate and all of that, I really feel that is really monitoring the students and ensuring that they graduate on time, as well as ensuring that the students on the elementary level moves forward, on the middle school level move forward with everything that they need to know to be able to make sure they graduate on time. And then those students we have a lot of students that withdraw. So what we have to make sure as counselors and administrators is make sure that when those students withdraw, that they are in an accelerated program and that program is accredited. And so what we do, we monitor that and we immediately take them off the roll. We really have increased graduation rate in almost all the districts I have been in is mainly because we monitor it and we make sure we pay attention to it.
Thank you.
Dr. Thompson, describe your experience in developing, implementing, and evaluating curriculum and instructional programs to raise student achievement.
Okay. Being the chief of teaching and learning over curriculum, as well as being over curriculum and instruction as a director, as well as interim deputy, I was over curriculum and instruction. Since I've held the role of chief of teaching and learning, I've had to write and implement several different instruction programs, and the literacy platform would be one that we wrote. The school improvement plan would be another. But also, when we talked about actually utilizing standards-based instruction, we had to ensure that our standards were aligned to all of the resources that we were using. And so we could not just say that here's this basal, reading basal, use it and let's move forward. We had to make sure that the standards, even it got down to textbook adoption. If we adopted a textbook, how did it align to the standards? It became a lot of work for my staff and myself because we began to realize, and I think it was an eye-opener for everyone to know that every resource is not going to have everything that you need to teach our children. It's just that it doesn't happen. So then that's when you get to really authentic teaching, and that's what we're all about. Sometimes we get so locked into programs, basals and those things like that, but what we have to really get into is authentic teaching styles. And so with that, we built programs around exactly what teaching really should look like in the classroom, from when the child sits down from 8 o'clock to 3 o'clock. So when the teacher says, I'm trying to work with this child, and I'm trying to work with all the diversity and all the different needs of these children, we actually laid it out for them and told them what differentiation instruction looks like. We used Debbie Diller a lot because it actually laid out the classroom structure for them. So we made it easy so our teachers really didn't have a lot. Sometimes the morale is low because our teachers are frustrated. We cannot sit at the top table, and I'm going to say that, and sometimes they call it the big table, and make decisions without including our teachers and our administrators with the decisions being made to actually work with them to train them as well as give them the resources they need. When I said that teachers really did not mind working, and it wasn't anything I could ask them for, it's because I made sure they had everything that they need. And if I did not have it, I made sure that they were trained on how to work with the varying students that were in their classrooms. So besides developing the pre-K through 12 platform, I've done all of that, as well as training at the college level. I recently designed and wrote a transformation plan because we had 10 schools that were really failing. And so we worked with those 10 schools in a different way than we worked with any of our other schools. We pushed in. And we didn't just say, okay, move the schools up, but we pushed in and worked side by side. We did demonstration lessons. We did co-teaching with the teachers. So it wasn't that the teachers weren't getting the support. We wanted to make sure that they knew that we were supporting them. We knew that the school was a difficult school to work with, and we gave them the support they needed to be successful. And so, when I began to think about all that, I just wrote a language immersion program. Not too long ago, that was all across the media, where we brought in, we taught, kindergarten, first grade learning Mandarin, Chinese, or Spanish fully, and they were going to really get to fifth grade to be able to speak 2 different languages. So that is something very important that, you have to make sure that plans are written, things are in place to make sure our teachers are successful. And I have written and implemented several programs to make sure that happens.
Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Thomson, what do you think is the role of career technical education?
It is very important. And let me now emphasize that, because when we think about a community that is trying to grow, and we're trying to build partnerships with the universities, with the different industries, with the different organizations and small businesses and all of that, we have to make sure that our career program is of high value to the community as well as to the students that are a part of it. I have worked with these programs so much that when I was in Montgomery, we actually partnered with the different businesses. With the banks began to host our meetings. We had law enforcement in there because we had a law enforcement class. We had some of the big manufacturing companies, they were part of it. The banks were part of it. The hotels were part of it. Cosmetology, all those people were part of it. And we sat in the room together and I said, what can we do to ensure that our career and technical program is top-notch, that when these students leave high school, they will actually be a part of your industry. And they began to tell us their needs and what they needed to happen. Interpersonal soft skills were one of the main things that they talked about that we had to train. So we built those training models into the program. Some students didn't have suits and did not know how to interview. We built interview skills into it. We built all this around what the industries were actually asking us for and telling us to do. But we went even a step further. The curriculum had to be rewritten. And so we actually they met every month and wrote the curriculum together with our teachers. The banks sat down and wrote the curriculum. This is what you need to add. The auto makers, they wrote this is what needs to happen if they were to come into our plant. But even since I've been in South Carolina, we partnered to where internships occurred. We actually had students to actually intern that was part of the program because we built those partnerships. So it plays a very important role in the community as well as in the higher educational realm of our K-12 institution.
Thank you.
What strengths do you have in the area of financial management, including budget development and ongoing fiscal management? Please give concrete examples.
Being chief of teaching and learning, I've had to oversee, the bulk of what I've overseen is probably about, I'll say with teaching and learning, about 4 million or more. But that's not inclusive of all the departments that came up under me. And they each had a budget of about $200,000 to $500,000. We had to meet to budget before we went and met with the county, because we would meet with the county council to make sure that the funding that was given to us was also allocated correctly and that what we were proposing aligned to what we actually were doing. And so I would have to meet with my staff, and we would have collaborative meetings about what the needs were as far as moving and accelerating learning. A lot of times when you're working with budgets, you have to make sure that the budget aligns to the needs of the students. So in working with I was about to call his name, our chief financial officer, I was about to say Ed, I had to make sure that teaching and learning was on the table. Because sometimes they want to put everything else on the table first. And so I was always the cheerleader for teaching and learning and say, now, how does that help teaching and learning? Because everything that we do with funding has to work in alignment with teaching and learning. If we remodel a building, how does that affect the environment of teaching and learning? If we buy additional books, how does that help teach? Everything has to align with teaching and learning. And so my budget and finance background really is about building budgets and building finance that aligns to teaching and learning for the betterment of students, ensuring that all students learn. And that's the key. And I've worked with, even the grant that I wrote for $14 million, I had to oversee all of those funds, the $14 million, to make sure that, invoices that were written were correct and paid on time, to make sure that the funds were not used inappropriately, that they were used for what we actually voted for. And this happens on many instances. When I was at Stanford University, we wrote grants. And so those grants also had to be a part of exactly what was needed at that institution at that time. And so overseeing budgets and finance has been really part of my outrole. When I was a principal, I had, I want to say, $300,000 worth of Title I funds, because we were in such a low poverty-stricken area. And so I had to oversee that amount of money as well as a principal. And so I've had to really oversee funds at every level of my career. Thank you.
Dr. Thomson, describe your experience with strategic planning.
Yes. Strategic planning is the core to who we are as an educational organization. I've worked with strategic plan as a principal, as a teacher, at the district office level, as well as at the university level. And I say that because when I was with Stanford, we actually partnered with schools, and we were one of the partners that sat at the table with writing the strategic plan. So when we brought everyone together, the planning for that was to ensure that everyone at the table had a voice. That was the key. And so I've had strong experience and relations with partners and stakeholders that really were a part of writing the strategic plan, as well as monitoring it at the end. Because I'm over teaching and learning, we would get the strategic plan out that has been approved by the board through several reviews and revisions. And then we had to make sure that it was implemented, and that it was implemented cohesively. And so sometimes we would have to modify some things because we realized when it was written that did not work for what was happening at the time. So we would actually have to go through it, and during our same professional learning community meetings, the strategic plan was at the top of the list. And so we would actually go through it and make sure all of the action steps that were placed in there, we would put the dates of completion by them, ensuring that we completed every one and making sure that it worked and that the strategies worked in alignment to student achievement and what we were trying to accomplish. So strategic planning has been something that I've done at every level, so I have a vast amount of experience with strategic planning, writing, as well as monitoring.
Dr. Thompson, when a new superintendent is hired, you want to make the transition as smooth as possible for everyone. How would you help both the educational community and the community at large adjust to the new governance style that will come with a new superintendent?
What I have done in collaboration with the supervision and leaders that I've worked under, we would always do town hall meetings and try to make sure that everyone understood what the expectations are moving forward and what is expected. What I do really within my community is build transitional teams. And those teams are really bringing everyone that's part of the community together, and we're part of a team. And they actually work to actually do conduct survey analysis and all of that to actually, see what's going on. So after all of this is happening, I'm on the back end really trying to just look forward and say, okay, listening and learning, trying to make sure I'm learning everyone and that they understand who I am and what my expectations are. So there will not be any miscommunication of what the expectations are. Trying to build rapport with everyone so they'll know. I have high expectations for myself. So any district that I work for, I would expect to have the same and high expectations. And I think our students deserve that. And so I would not shortchange them. And I would not shortchange the employees that work for me either. And so what I would do is make sure that is known up front through town hall meetings, through the transitional team that will be built. Coming in, that would consist of university and college staff, businesses would be part of that, as well as teachers, administrators, a board member would be part of that team as well. People from the city council would be part of that team. So you're bringing the community together. So when you go out, you're all speaking the same language. That is the key. We do not, I'm a firm believer that if we're in a meeting and we're having a discussion, when we leave the meeting, we should all be speaking the same language. We should not be speaking different voices. We are all here for the same goal, and that goal is to educate students. And so when we set that on the table, we come forward, everyone's sitting around the table with the same idea and the same purpose. And so when that happens, as one, we'll walk out with that same thought span. So really it won't be a whole lot of question about what the superintendent wants, but what do we want as a team? And what do we expect as a team? Because we're in this together. It's not, the superintendent is the leader and the facilitator of the organization, ensuring that as a visionary leader, that everything goes forward according to what the board desires and the community desires. But as a team, we accomplish that.
Let me add something else to that. And I know it's not on paper, but it's not far from it.
That's okay.
Because as a pastor, I've taken on ministries that when you go in, they're used to doing it one way. And your ideas and your vision for the ministry may be a little different than what they're used to. You may have some resistance. How would you deal with that if you had someone that they sold on the way they have done it, the way they feel like they do it is versus your vision? How would you be able to, convince them to pretty much follow your vision a smooth way without any conflict?
I want to say that you're always going to have someone or individuals that do not think the way you think. That is the way of the world. And that's part of society. But what we have to be reminded of is that we're all here for students. And so what I always do, I've walked into that situation so many times where I have 5 for me and 4 against me. And I remember saying something, and I want to say, was our principal what? I can't remember what position I held, but I remember it very vaguely, and I remember it very distinctly saying, my allegiance are to the students of this school or this district. And that's who my allegiance is to, because when I set out to serve and to serve students, sometimes the adults really kind of move in and prevent some of that because of those different varying beliefs and differences. But what I do, I try to work with everyone. And the collaboration is what is so important. You want to make sure you listen and hear everyone's voice, and I do that. Now, are your decisions always leaning towards everyone's and what you decide to do? No, it will not happen that way. But it's going to be for the best and the benefit of students. So when I make my decisions, I'm going to listen to all 5, 10, 20 voices that are speaking at the same time. But at the end, the decision that has to be made is to go the best for students. And so in any position I'm in, that's my stance. And I always stand with that. And when I do, I never go wrong. As a minister myself, I do the same thing in church. I do the same thing everywhere I go. They are not going to be with you always. And I know that. I would not be sitting here if I thought that everybody in this room was for me. I built thick skin because I know my purpose, and my purpose is to serve students and serve the people who serve those students. And if we keep that in the forefront, we can be successful. And when I say successful, the adults can be successful as well as our students, and that's why we're here.
One more thing, I'm sorry. Would you be willing to deal with, okay, I'm sure like you said, you had the experience with dealing with several school systems. Have you ever had to deal with, maybe a rebellious teacher or employee that felt like they had people in higher powers that they felt like they was untouchable, and did you deal with it, or was you afraid to deal with it because of maybe some confrontation or some kickback may happen to you in your position?
I'm trying to reflect, and I don't say politics. I don't want to be. I think we need to put the correct phrase with it and make sure that we're using the correct terminology with that. It's everywhere. I have had people that I had to deal with that had people in higher places, but I don't know if it's my personality. I'm just going that I end up being on the top because I always put the kids first. And when you put those students in front of somebody who's trying to speak differently, I just come back with the question, what is best for this child? Or what is best for this organization with the children that we serve in it? And when that happens, and I'll say, if it is that this person, because they have someone who is higher up than me, I'll just say, I pray for that child, because that child is going to end up suffering at the end of the day. I have had teachers that were in position, and I'm not going to say so much as people in higher places, they were tenured. And tenure employees are the hardest employees to dismiss. And so you have to document. And so what I have found is that if you keep the students in the forefront, you don't have, I think in my time as a principal, if I released anyone, it was one. Because they begin to find out themselves. They do not want to be, if you're right and you're doing what's right, right will follow you. And so people will not want to be part. If they are not being honest, they're not being for the students that we're here to serve, they will automatically dismiss themselves. Or they will actually be transferred. And I've had people to want to be transferred because my program or my strategies were too straightforward. I am very open-minded with what I believe in about kids. I went from one profession to another one, and I came to serve. I'm a servant leader. I'm a strong believer in, I have integrity. I have compassion in my heart, but I serve. And when I serve hard. And so if anyone want to hold my servant leadership against me, that will have to be on their hands, because I'm going to serve students.
Dr. Thompson, this is a diverse community. How will you work to ensure that all groups are fully engaged with schools and the system as a whole?
Well, I'm used to working with diverse areas. I came from Homewood, and if you all know Homewood serves high, medium, low socioeconomic status, as well as racial diversity. You know, it's very, very, very strong. And so you deal with it on both strands of the spectrum. And what you have to do is make sure that your decisions that you're making, that you're thinking of the entire organization and everyone that you serve. So when we sit at the table and we're making decisions, we're looking at every child and everything about that child, that community, what the parents would think if we were to make this decision. If we were to, the language immersion school, I'll give you an example. We had to take a school that had 100 plus students in it. We knew something had to happen with this school. We knew it. But at the same time, the community was very strong. Dealing with diversity, no matter what level it's at, everyone, they're going to hold strong to their beliefs and what they desire and what they want. But at the same time, we knew financially it had to happen. So what we did to appease and work with everyone to make sure we heard and we listened and heard everyone's voice, we put the language immersion school into that school and had a school as a school, and we allowed that community to be the first individuals to actually enroll into the language immersion program, to let them know that we were not pushing them to the side, that we really were working with them. So the key is to make sure that pulling a diverse community together is to not just have town hall meetings in the different communities, but to have meetings where everyone comes together and everyone's voice is heard at the same time. Because when we're trying to build cohesiveness and bring a diverse community together, we don't need to always have our town hall meetings or our community meetings just in those cluster neighborhoods. We need to make sure that they have meetings together so they can hear each other's wants, hear each other's needs, and then you have compassion that comes forward. Because now I hear what this side of town is dealing with. I'm over here. I did not know they were dealing with all of that. And so then you begin to come together as one and work collaboratively together. And then you said, okay, well, we needed the funds, but look like school A is struggling more. Their school needs painting. And, you know, we thought it was time for our school to be painted. But now we're hearing what's happening and how it looks over there. We need to work together and make sure that we're on a schedule that all schools get painted at the same time. So now everyone is hearing everyone, and the voices are being heard all together uniformly in one room, and we're not separating everyone that is already diverse. And so we need to make sure that we bring everyone together so we can hear each other's voice and we can really work collaboratively together and be one. And that's the key. Thank you.
Would you like to have a break, or you want to keep going?
We can keep going.
All right.
Okay.
Describe specific strategies that you would use to promote public support for school activities, budget, and instructional programs.
When I think about strategies that promote, I'm going to write all of them down. Public support, school activities and budget, instructional programs, that's correct?
Correct.
When I think of those strategies, I think about, when I'm talking about public support, I'm often reminded that the public wants to be included. That's the key. And so even though, I'm going to say this, and I'm saying it from experience, they may not come to the meetings, but they still want to be included. So what we have to do is find a way to include them at everything by sending out messages. I would send newsletters out. I would send emails out. We started doing text messaging and all these different things to make sure that they were informed. And that was the key, is that how do we inform the public even though they may not be in our presence? And so when I think about laboring and soliciting public support, I need to first include them in every way possible. I need to make sure that I'm transparent, that they know what's happening at the school, with the school district. That's through newsletters, that's through town hall meetings, open communication, and all those different things. And that is really to bring in their support and be able to work with us as a district as a whole. That would be one. When I think about school activities and how we would garner those, we have activities, yes, but those activities need to be inclusive to what the community is doing. So if the community is having I'll say fair, arts fair. Are our schools including their art into those fairs? You know, how inclusive are our activities over here and the community's activities over here? What we need to do is find a way to bring the activities together, that we're constantly working together to really build this partnership that we're requesting and we're desiring. So that would be a key, is that we actually not just say we want the partnerships, that we find ways to build on those partnerships. That would be another way with school activities, that school activities would be more not just inclusive of just the school district, but they would include the community as well. That would be another strategy. The budget overall, when I think about the budget, every time we have our budget meetings, and this is from experience, we write the budget, but I tell you, when we go to the community, we have to go right back to the table and change the budget. And so the thing is being transparent. It's included amended. So we would actually build a budget, and we would have things in there, and we would go and have everything. You know, that's part of the budget process, that you have to, present it to the public. And so we would actually go and have our meetings, and we would have them in the different sectors and invite everyone, publicize it, that we're having the budget meetings. Some will come, some will not, but they will come, and they will come full force. And we would have to go back to the table and review the budget again, because I guarantee you, those same individuals are going to go to the county council, who we have to get the budget approved with. So what we had to do, we were always listening and learning. That's the key. We were listening and learning all the time, and I do that in everything I do. So that's another strategy that we use, is make sure that we listen and we learn and we pay attention to what our public is desiring and what they want. And when we think about instructional programs, I wrote my dissertation on culturally relevant teaching behaviors. And when that was written, it was all about how do we ensure that our instruction is built around the cultures that we serve. And that we're not really writing instruction, and our curriculum is not just aligned to the middle group, as the question came. But it is really addressing all of the students that we serve. And so when we think about strategies for our instructional programs, it would be really built around ensuring that everything we do, everything we purchase, is in alignment to the needs of all of our students. And if we're purchasing something different for each student, we have to ensure that it is going to build that sector of students. And then what are we doing to make sure that the other students do not fall behind while we're working with these students? And those are some of the strategies I would use.
Thank you. Dr. Thompson, share with us and explain on when you were especially involved in addressing a funding gap.
Okay. I have several. I'm going to talk about the state mandate for the reading program. That mandate comes out, like a lot of our state mandates, without funding. And I'm just being, I've worked in many districts, and it's across the board. We get mandates, and a lot of times those mandates come and we do not have the funding to ensure that the mandate goes over the way it needs to, or we may have limited funding, I'll say that, or we have to pull from other funding to make sure it's successful. Well, with the reading program that we had to incorporate, it came down very limited funding. But we knew we had to train these teachers and these administrators to be reading certified. We knew that. So the best thing we could do was to make sure that we trained them, because we knew that the central office staff could actually go to the meetings and not be pulled out of the schools and pulled away from students and pulled away from the schools to get it done. So we trained the district office staff. Well, immediately they thought, well, what are we going to do about this? Are we moving from this assignment to do this assignment? No, we have to do both. And so sometimes, a lot of times the schools don't understand what is happening at the district level to make things happen successfully. So that's where the transparency comes from. But what we ended up doing was that we had to train all of them. So I required the district level staff be trained, and they would actually be the providers of the staff development. So what we did, they became certified first. And then after they were certified, they trained the others. So we still have the problem of teachers staying after school and not being paid. Because, if they stay sometimes late afterwards or whatever, is that problem of being paid or whatever. So we had to build it to whereas during their professional development time, we trained them during that time to make sure that we did not have the conflict of not paying them. Principals, we met with them monthly. During that monthly session, they were trained on their training, and we really dealt with that funding gap that way. We used internal staff to kind of fill the gap.
Okay, what was the solution?
At the end, the solution was is that individuals became certified. The teachers became certified and the administrators became certified. So the solution was is that we use internal staff to train, to align with the mandate that came from the state to train the teachers. And so the solution was is that we ended up with our district having teachers and administrators certified reading specialists.
One moment. What was the risk involved?
The risk involved was, I would say, well, we were concerned with the teachers coming and wanting to get paid and they couldn't get paid. So it was a risk there if we tried to keep them afterwards that they weren't getting paid, and we knew that would run into a really kind of like a tapestry that, that could not happen. And so, one of the risks was that some of our, I'll tell you another risk that was really important. Some of our central office staff, because they did not have their master's degree, could not be trainers. So we ended up with a limited number of trainers. Whereas even myself and I had to pull from some of our executive directors, and some of those individuals had to be trained because they had the credentials to actually be trained as specialists before they received the certificate. Because you had to if you got the certificate with minimal hours, you had to already have certain credentials up front. And so that's what happened. So that was the risk.
Okay, Dr. Thompson, how have you held your staff members accountable for the student achievement while balancing the demands put on teachers?
I would say, I talked earlier about quick successes. And so my staff, they always knew what needed to happen because we were always watching the data together. We had it set up, it was, consistent. 1 week they met with me, and that's when I laid the data out. The next week, they normally would meet as the math team, and then the ELA or the reading team. Then the final week, they had to plan on their own. They had to come together, and they had to actually sit up and come up with strategies and plans. So it wasn't top down. So it was where they were a part of the structure, they were part of the planning, and so even though I was holding them accountable, they were also holding themselves accountable. As I mentioned, they would come into the meetings and say, I knew you were going to ask me about that child. I knew you were going to ask me if that strategy you employed that we used was working. And so with that being said, the accountability was already out front. It was, the expectations, were already out front of what they were being held accountable for. And so that was one thing that I did. Something else is that, teachers and administrators, and I'm not going to just say teachers, but administrators, because administrators get burned out as well. Because sometimes they have teachers who are really, it's hard, at every level. And I used to always tell my central office staff, you're not on the front lines. The principals and the teachers are on the front lines. This is what I need you to do. And so it was an understanding at every level what the expectations were. And so, working at the central office level has just moved me. That's the reason I've always taken hard assignments to get to this role of superintendent, because you begin to see what needs to happen at every level. And at each level, I began to see exactly what was needed. And my central office staff needed to understand that they had to work just as hard as the schools did because they were not. So I held them at a higher accountability level than I did the principals and the teachers. Because you are now outside the classroom, what supports can you provide? And so everyone kind of knew going in what needed to happen. Everyone had to work hard, and at the end, we were all successful as a district, as schools, as individuals. And so, as I always say, everyone wants to be part of a winning team, and that's what happened.
Okay, I think you answered several of these. What measures have you used that are outside of test scores, if needed?
I measured the process. if I was I remember when I first started really working with school improvement, I was trying to have my meetings every 4 weeks. And because I felt every 4 weeks was the right time to do it. I didn't want to have the data out there too long. I didn't want them to be using that strategy too long. So I tried to have them every 4 weeks. So I began to realize that was too soon because we did not have enough data within 4 weeks. So I moved it to 6 weeks. So I would measure the process along with the data. I would utilize surveys because we always talk about morale. The morale has to be high in order to get students, for student success, student achievement to rise. Morale has to be at an all-time high. And I know that. And so I'm always listening. I would be on the phone talking to somebody and I would hear a conversation and I say, what happened? What is happening with that teacher or with that administrator? And they said, Dr. Thompson, you on the phone, you heard that. Yes, because I'm listening. I want to make sure everyone is being taken care of because I do not want that one thing could happen and really ruin the whole entire organization. And we don't want that to happen. And so I'm constantly listening to see what do we need to change? What do we need to make happen to make sure that the process is going smoothly, as well as we're monitoring the data and whatever, because sometimes the resources, I talked about I do resource audits. I do those audits all the time, and I will sometimes choose a school and say, I want to see if they're using this to fidelity, because there's no need for us to pay $200,000 for a piece of software if we're not utilizing it to fidelity. So what I would do is do a resource audit right in the middle and pull that up and say, okay, we're not using it to fidelity, or we are using it to fidelity, and guess what? It's not working. So why are we using it? So I would do those type of things. So I would really, my measures would go deep, surveys, resource audits, processes, in addition to data, because I don't think we can exclude data, but that's in addition to data.
Okay, thank you.
As we select a new superintendent for Gadsden City Schools, what are the top 3 strengths, attributes you believe you bring that our district could benefit from?
Integrity. I really feel in my heart, Reverend Huff asked a lot of questions about things that happen under and around the structure. But if you hold to your integrity, you're successful. And that's why I have been successful in everything I've touched, I've put my hands on, is because I hold to my integrity. I don't waver according to the needs of students. And when I say students, I say all students. Advanced Ed came out with their platform now is that all students. If you have just gone through Advanced Ed, you read it says all students. And they do that because if you give a plan and you write out an action step and a strategy in there, it talks about all students, and they'll come back and ask. We've been trained to come back and ask and say, well, if it's for all students, why is this cluster not doing well? And why is this cluster doing well and this one's not? So they use the all students so you can grade yourself correctly. So a lot of times in Advanced Ed, you find yourself giving yourself a 3 or 4. Well, immediately we have to question 3s and 4s, because if all students are not meeting that, then you cannot be in a 3 and you cannot be in a 4. And so Advanced Ed came up with that strategically to actually have districts and organizations to actually question themselves and their practices and their processes. And so when I think of integrity, I remember sitting with my group and I said, we work now, but are we really a 3 if it says all students? It makes you question yourself, but the integrity in me makes me say, no, I cannot write a 3, I cannot write a 4. And so they said, well, can we write a 2.5? We work hard, we're doing this. So, that's being put out there. But I'm constantly holding firm with how are we being held accountable? And we have to align ourselves to that and what we're being held accountable to. The other thing I would bring is knowing and being able to increase student achievement. That is a plus for me. I've held the positions that I've held to make sure I can say profoundly that I know without a doubt that I can move students academically at every level, because I've worked every level and I understand what is needed at every level. So I would bring the attribute of being able to increase student achievement. And I talked about my interpersonal skills earlier, but I'm gonna say it a little different. Being able to build a team of oneness. When I say individuals call, when I was a principal, I had more men on my staff than anyone could. They did not know how it happened because people want to work with someone who treats them well, who involves them in the process, who can bring them together, who can make them feel like they're one and like they're part of the organization. I do that. I develop I guess the essence of we are one team. And so at the end of the day, there's no big I, little U's. It's we are all in this together. So when I come in, I can pull a team together. And there's been a saying about that Thomson can get a rock to work, you know, and it's not that, it's because I treat people well. I treat them with dignity and I treat them with respect. So at the end of the day, we do become one without a question because we all want to work together and we all are working for the same purpose at the end of the day.
Thank you. I believe Mr. Haney said he has some additional questions.
Yes, ma'am, thank you. These questions are to understand what you submitted about your resume and background. And if I have something you don't understand, make sure I make it clear because there's no trick to any of this. I'm just looking for information, okay?
Okay, that's fine.
What is Dimensional Leadership LLC? What is that?
It's a consultant firm company which I build that actually we help build leaders. When I was with Stanford University, I worked with several of the professors there and we worked on leadership development. And so what we ended up doing was coaching leaders, building them up, and so that's what we do, mentor and coach leaders. I also work with universities. I recently aligned their course of studies with the state standards, and those are some of the things I do as well.
Well, yeah. How many employees does Dimensional Leadership have?
I am the executive director, and I have other retired educators working with me. So it's just about 3 of us, 2 or 3 of us.
And what I didn't really understand in your resume is you were working for Dimensional Leadership and the district in South Carolina at the same time.
I was doing part-time services, like the work I did for the college. I did that part-time.
While you were working for the district.
Yes, it was just some consultant work.
Yeah.
Yes.
And it was a little bit confusing. You ended your relationship with the district in 2017.
Correct.
Okay,
And it was,
you've been exclusively with this, the other 2 folks with Dimensional Leadership since then.
that is correct. That is correct.
And when I was looking at your work history, it appears to show that the 2 of the jobs you left in March. That would have been from Montgomery to go to Lowndes County. But you didn't go to work in Lowndes County until August. And I was at a loss why you leave in the middle of the school year.
No, that was in October. I left Montgomery in October. You sure in October? Yes.
Left Montgomery in October.
Right, to go to Lowndes County.
So
That's correct. It was a request, really. They needed assistance. They were working on the grant, and I was at the time, had been principal at E.D. Nixon. Mr. Dilworth was superintendent at the time with Montgomery. He left and went back to Louisiana. And at the time, I was working at the central office and assisting back at the school, assisting the principal, Mr. Anthony Lewis, who was in place at the time. So when the offer came up to apply to be over curriculum and instruction and Title I with Lowndes County, which was like 20 minutes away. And when I got the call, I took the opportunity. I looked at it as advancement and an opportunity to pursue for further experience.
Well, maybe the information that was on the resume was wrong. That was what was confusing. But you left Montgomery in the during the school year as opposed to at the end. I just wanted to make sure of that.
That's my,
And then apparently you left Lowndes County in March to go to Kansas, is that right?
that is correct.
Okay, so it was right on that.
That is correct. That is correct.
Now, I'm curious about your relationship to anyone in Gadsden. When you found out the job was available, did you call anybody in Gadsden to talk to them about the job?
No, I don't know anyone in Gadsden. No. I worked with Alabama School Board Association. That's who I worked with.
So you weren't acquainted with anybody in Gadsden?
No, I've never been to Gadsden. Didn't know anyone or no acquaintance.
What information were you provided about the Gadsden City School System?
Alabama School Board Association, I often have worked with them. Just looked on their site and knew that they had the position open. And so I was provided the outlook of the district and really, the number of schools, where they are, strong community background and all of that. So it's really the brochure that was out there in Alabama on the association website. That's what I was provided, just like any other candidate. I wasn't provided anything differently.
So as you come to us now, you don't have any opinion about the strengths or weaknesses of the school system?
Well, I have reviewed the school district, and I do know academically there are some challenges. I do feel that we do need to come together and look at those strengths and weaknesses and improve upon them. I do know that there are some schools that are really achieving higher than other schools. Even with my visit today, I do understand that the student-teacher ratio is varying from school to school. I understand that it would take some research to know why it is that way. And what we can do collaboratively to improve it. And so I have reviewed the data, and I even have a copy of your strategic plan that you have, and the action steps that you have put in place.
That's what I was asking. Who provided that to you?
I copied it off your internet site.
You went online, that's what I'm saying. And the information other than that, you said it all came off the website.
Yes, I pulled it, I went, like I would hope any candidate would do that. You go and you pull the information for the district in which you're applying. You want to do your research, you want to do your background, you don't want to walk in anything blindly, and to make sure also that you're a good fit. And I feel that because of my experience, I am a good fit for the superintendency of Gadsden City Schools.
What did you find about the strengths of the school system?
Well, I feel that the strength is that, like I said, in the strategic plan, what is written is cohesive to continuous school improvement. So everything that's written is good, and it's what the same practices that I have performed and I've utilized. And so I think that is good. And so all I would need to do is really kind of come in and work with the team that put that together and ensure that it is consistently monitored and it is consistently done. And as well as the leadership, I looked over the leadership. I noticed that some individuals the last 3 years the leadership has been changed, and I talking to some of them today. I think those are strong suits as well.
We talked about student achievement. What experience do you have with expansion of learning experiences for top achievers, AP students?
Oh, wow, extensive. I have worked with Gifted. I have extended the Gifted program. When I talked about, student achievement is one component, but at the same time, I have built career technical programs. Those programs that were built, they were not for low performers. Career technical programs are not for our low performers, but really some of my higher achieving students, really one of our high schools, that achieves very high, they actually have dual enrollment. It increased up under me by going to Midlands Tech and taking engineering classes. So dual enrollment has increased tremendously under my leadership, as well as writing the language immersion program. It was not for low performing students. It was really to help us to ensure that what we were doing, that we were just as competitive as any other district. And that's the key, that what we want to do is build programs within our district that would allow us to be just as competitive within it. And so I've done a lot of things within organizations to ensure that that occurs.
The top achievers have increased opportunities to
Exactly.
Achieve.
Exactly. To achieve and to continue where they are and to do it and continue to move up. Extracurricular programs, bringing in chess tournaments, golf tournaments, all those different type of tournaments that actually help them with their math and what to do. It aligns to curriculum, and so we didn't just focus on the middle. The question came about the middle level kids and the low level kids. We also had to focus on the high level kids because they can drop down and be at the bottom of the bar as well as the middle. So we have to make sure that what we're doing for all students is excelling.
If we ask the staff members of your former employers to tell us what your strengths and weaknesses are, what would they say?
I would say interpersonal, working with others, building teams, writing models, bringing teams together, diagnostic work of programs that we use, working with the varying departments, and working with the community. I'm very known for that, and working. I got a call from my granddaughter, retired. He was one of the top individuals at the district, and said that I sure could work with her again, mainly because I have good working skills with individuals and pulling them together. So I think they would speak highly of my interpersonal skills as well as being able to work with curriculum and understand curriculum and instruction, what it is all about.
What would they say your weaknesses were?
Probably my push for ensuring, because sometimes I feel we only have students for 12 years, that's all we have, 13 kindergarten. And my push is that being mindful that we only have that short time. And sometimes I push, and I really do push. And so they may say, Doc, we're still working on this program, and we're picking up another assignment. So sometimes my drive, they may think maybe that. But the only thing is that I'm right there with them. So I'm doing just as much work as they're doing. So even though they may consider it as I push hard or whatever, at the same time, they do it with a smile on their face.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I believe Pastor Huck has some more questions.
It's not gonna be long. I've had people to have their children to come through the school system, graduate, make AB on the roll, the Beta Club, and then get off to college, take the placement test there, end up taking beginner courses. And I guess my question would be, would you come in and evaluate the curriculum and make sure, and I think I'm just going to use it this way, make sure that curriculum is true curriculum and not watered down curriculum just to get our kids through school to pad what we would call the books to say that the graduate rate is good, but then set up our children for failure once they leave school. Because once they get to college, they discover that they're not on the level that they should have been on once they walked across the stage. Mm-hmm. So, and did I hear you say you wrote curriculums? And mm-hmm. Okay, so I think that would pretty much be a very strong point that we would need, I would say, true curriculum. That is not, if it's Algebra 1, it need to be Algebra 1. Mm-hmm. And they should be taking beginning math once they get to college if they don't already took Algebra 1. Mm-hmm. You follow what I'm saying?
Right. That's called grade inflation. That's really what it is. But what happens with that is that if you do not have measures in place at the district level, then you would constantly have grade inflation. And teachers have to be held accountable, and administrators have to be held accountable for that. And what that is that assessments are produced that align to how the students will be assessed at the end of the year. And so they are assessed on those. So if they are not doing well on the assessment, because what they're doing, they are making the grade A and B, but I guarantee you on the state assessments, they are not making A's and B's. So what you have to do is ensure that how they are being assessed by the state and other national, entities, that it aligns to what that A and B says. So that's standards-based instruction. So what you have to make sure is that students are meeting the standards and excelling past excelling on the standard. And so when you have standards-based instruction, you would align your assessments around those standards. And so if that student has mastered their standard, they can master any assessment. So, excuse me, what happens is that we give the grade here, and then we look at the assessment, and we get upset because it's publicized in the paper, and it's publicized throughout the community. And then, but we see the A and B on the report card, and we sort of, put a Band-Aid on it and move on because they're doing that. But those assessments, those national norms, they are there. And even though I do not base all education on them, I still feel that they are a measurement tool. And we have to make sure we're paying attention to that measurement tool, because what I don't want to do is set students up for failure. I don't want to do that. And so you have to make sure that they're prepared, because I've said that to teachers. You're setting these kids up for failure, because if they cannot do it here, they cannot do it when they leave us. And so you have to make sure you're aligning your in-house assessments with how they're going to be measured at the end. And that's what you're monitoring at those PLCs throughout the year. You're constantly reviewing those and monitoring those throughout the year. And so as you begin to do that, then that's when you're going to get the phone call and say, wait a minute now. And those you don't have to base grades on them, but they need to be known to the parents need to understand this is what they're doing every 9 weeks on the assessment that is going to be aligned to the assessment that they take at the end of the year. And then that's when the partnerships will build. This is what we need to do. That's when strategies need to be changed. That's when things need to be accommodated, and students need to be accommodated at that time. And so that is part of the process.
Here's my last one, I promise you. We was told that the average lifespan of a superintendent's contract and for as that they stay at a school system is 3 years. Now, my opinion, you won't see your results until you're gone if you stay only 3 years. Especially coming in from not knowing the personnel and not able to make moves immediately. It's going to take some time. Mm-hmm. Some people accept jobs just to get the experience, looking to go somewhere else. That's more, I say, that looks better to them. You know what I'm saying? Not so much that I just want to be for this system. When more another one come open that looks better and more attractive than this one, they'll cut out. My question to you is, if you were hired as the superintendent of Gadsden City Schools, would you see your vision all the way through, or would you be willing to see your vision all the way through, or is it just something for you to add to your resume?
No, it would not be for me. Let me say, I do know the stats for superintendencies, legacy, and how long they stay. But normally, what the research says is normally not always because of something looking more promising. Sometimes it's really because the community has not bought in, or the board and the superintendent is all that is entwined in there. So that's what research really says. So I have already had my experiences. Mr. Haney talked about my experience of going to those other districts and all. Those were my opportunities. It was really to get to this. I am at a level in my life. I'm not young by any means. I have reached my plateau, and I really would like to stay and see fruition of my work. I've done that, and I'm not saying it just to make it sound good. Just to be honest, I've been at the district I was there 5 years. I was a principal when I moved that school. I was there 6 years. The opportunities that was given to me was because of the things I did in those districts. It was not because I just jumped up and did it. Yes, opportunity came, but it was always the pursuit of getting to a superintendent position and a higher leadership role. I have not My husband is at a stage, he's not going to be moving and moving around. He's very precise about that. He's very supportive of my work. I am true to what I do, and I do like to see fruition in what I do. I like to see what happens. I like to see the numbers move. And I like to be able to say that it did happen under my leadership. If it was to happen under someone else, they would take the credit for it. That's what happens. And that's not really what you always want. I do believe in what I do. I believe in the work that I do. I'm confident in what I can do. And I'm not speaking boastfully about that. I'm speaking because of the experience that I have. But I do feel that I am at the plateau of my stage that I would not have applied for this job if I was not trying to move back to Alabama and get back to my roots, as well as to be in a district of this size. There are other larger districts and all, but I feel that, I've always worked in districts around the same size or close to it. The school district I was in just now, it had 23,000, but that experience has helped me to lead a district of this plateau. So that's who I am. That's who I am.
Thank you.
Thank you for your patience, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you.
I feel like I have an obligation to ask this. In the political arena, at our meetings, there's been a lot of discussion about charter schools. And I would like to know your opinion, your thoughts regarding charter schools, if you don't mind.
Yes, I don't mind giving it to you. I have fought charter schools all the way in every job I've had. And that's not saying it ugly. It's that in Kansas, we had to fight them because our enrollment was decreasing. And what happened was we had to end up getting the students back and pulling them back up. So I know what charter schools are and what they exist of. I know about charter schools. The job I held as chief of teaching and learning, I inherited 3 because they were sponsored by the district. In South Carolina, you had, most of the time you get a district to sponsor you. I think it's that way here as well. And so we don't sponsor it anymore, but we had 3. We closed down one. It was a community nightmare, but they were not doing justice for students. They were paid high salaries. The environment was deplorable. Academics was all time low. You went in, the computers were they had borrowed computers from an agency that had closed down. The computers were outdated. The teachers were teachers that were not suitable to teach. And they had our students in those classrooms, and we closed the school down. We had to go to court. We had to do a whole lot of things to close it. And so because of that, and I'm not saying that some charter schools don't work, I'm not saying that, but I feel that public education is what we need to put our funds in. We need to invest in our teachers, invest in all, because at the end of the day, those students come back to us. They are our students. I believe in building signature programs. That's the reason for the Chinese and Spanish immersion program, is to ensure that we have signature programs, because that's what charter schools try to do to persuade our kids to come. We need to build those type of programs within the district to whereas those students stay in our district to have that choice. Because that's what they're looking for, is choice. What choice are we providing? We're providing the education, but are we providing other choice and signature programs to make sure that our students stay with us? IB, how extensive are our IB programs? Talking about higher achieving students. Our IB program excelled, because we wanted to make sure those students stayed with us. And they didn't just take IB, but they passed the IB diplomacy at the end. Because a lot of times you enroll them in IB, then they can't pass the components to get the IB diploma. And so we wanted to make sure that they got the IB diploma. And so what we did, we had it in one of our, because we serve suburban, urban, and rural in one district. We were in a 500-mile radius. So it was in one of our high suburban schools. We moved it into one of our rural schools and did the same thing. The students were struggling past getting the IB diploma. But what we had to do is make sure things were in place to make sure that they excelled, just like our other school that was in our suburban area did as well. So we were trying to pull every resource to make sure signature schools, signature programs was across the district holistically, to make sure that they were not being pulled to private schools. You speak of charter, but our private schools do the same thing. So, they end up pulling our students as well, but what are we doing to ensure that we keep our students and that we're building signature programs around that to make sure that they stay with us? And so that's my goal, is really coming in and building signature programs that will help our students stay and want to be a part of our program.
I'll just got one more thing. I'm a stories person, and
That's okay.
I know there's a lot of guidelines and regulations, and it sounds like leadership and administration is your area of giftedness. And I just wonder, I like to hear stories. Can you think of a situation, or you were teaching, maybe where a seed was planted and you saw where a child, maybe you helped a child turn the corner or a light come on? Can you think of a time? I just like to hear.
I can think of several, and I'm going to give you 2 or 3, and not to prolong the time, but I think it's important. I was a teacher in Homewood, with Homewood City Schools. I was teaching 2nd grade, advanced on to 5th grade. But I remember I was going back to school, and I remember a very prominent parent in the community. And the students were receiving work, and because I was getting all this extensive work at my college, though, from Sanford. Sanford is almost like an Ivy League college, So I brought it in, I was giving the student this work, and the parent came up to me and said, "Hard is not always great, Dr. It's not always best." Miss Thompson, I was Miss Thompson at the time. And I looked at it, I said, "But the child is doing it." I said, what's going on here? The child is not complaining, the child is in the word, but I guess the child will go home and say, "Look what we had to do today." And it was a fish diagram. You all probably know, you've been to school what a fish diagram is for 2nd graders, but they did it. So I feel like we have to be able to help students excel and meet those high expectations. We keep it here. And so they're gonna meet that. But if we raise the bar, they're gonna meet that bar. And so I remember that, and I still hold to that today. Another instance is when I was at a principal and low performing school, and the students, it was deplorable what was happening. They were not learning, and they were moving on. And I remember we took the assessment, and it was a child who had really been had some things going on in their home life and environmental, and he put the pencil down, and the teacher said he ran out the classroom and he found me. And he was jumping up almost to the ceiling. He was a tall guy. He said, "I aced it. I aced it." He had so much confidence because of the way he had been taught that he had already passed the SAT test. Those are stories that we need to continuously tell. That all students can learn. And this child believed in himself so hard that he was almost in tears. And I'm talking about a big young man. But he was standing there, and he was just jumping up. "I aced it, Doc, I aced it." And he was so happy. And I'll tell you, I went into my office and cried because I had met what I was trying to do. If you can get a student to to have that confidence, and you can move teachers to where they said, at the time, the book was out, By Any Means, we had read a book that talked about any means necessary or whatever it takes. And they were going down the hall, "Whatever it takes, Dr. Thompson, whatever it takes," They were going down the hall, look at me. I said, whatever it takes to move these babies. And so that was the saying, and they would be at a copy machine. "Whatever it takes, Dr. Thompson, whatever it takes." And I was at a point that we did not have a copy machine, and I was giving them so much. And I said, I don't believe in ditto sheets. Y'all know that. I don't believe in it. But it was so funny that my counselor came to me and said, "Doc, they working so hard. Just get them a copy, but just tell them how many copies to make, And so I bought them a copy machine. We didn't wear blue jeans. We didn't. I believe that we needed to dress for success for the students we were serving. So my counselor came to me again and said, "Doc, we one of the top schools in the state. Can they wear them on Friday?" And I said, "As long as they don't have holes in them, they don't have this and all that." So we did that. But it was just the successes that came along with it, that the story that they tell, and now they found me on Facebook, and they're saying, "Doc, because they still believe in those things, and they still believe." So those are stories that you live by, and that if you never teach again, if you never do anything again, or if you never put into a position again, you live by those moments.
Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Thompson, we have barraged you with questions this afternoon. I want to give you the opportunity to ask us questions. Is there anything that you need to know from us?
Yes, I do have a few, even though I have. I guess, I have been asked a lot of questions of what is expected of me. And like I said, I'm built for this. I've been through quite a bit in my career. And I stand sound. I've invested a lot in me. I went to the best schools. I made sure I got those best positions that would get me to this position. In some positions, you cannot walk from a principalship into this position. So I felt the experience, I needed that experience. But at the same time, what is the one thing the new superintendent has to do in order to be successful? Because I can speak of my success all day long. And I know I can be successful in the position, but I would need support. But what is one thing from this board that the superintendent would need to ensure that they're successful and that they stay in the position?
My thoughts on that? It's what and I think we as a board can agree on this. We want the individual in the superintendent's position to come in and assess our system and move us so that all students, top, middle, and bottom, are provided the best education possible. That's what I want. Anybody else?
Can I put a little humor to
Sure.
it? Will you do the Ron Park on the table?
I don't know if I can walk the table at my age, but I'll get somebody to do it.
I would say, keep us in the loop. We need to know. It shouldn't be. We shouldn't get calls from the school or teachers to inform us what the central office already should know, and that we already, we just stay in the loop. Whatever issues that arise, let us be the first. Let us hear it from you, not from other folks. And I think that's something. Since I've been on the board, I've gotten calls from people saying, this, saying that. I'm not going to say what it is, and then I find out 2 days later that something being investigated, and I already done found out. And of course, I pastor a church, so I get all the rumors. You know what I'm saying? So, but it's like, this is my whole thing about, if it look like you're hiding something, you are. Just be open and honest, and then let's deal with it as pretty much, partners or, working together. I think working together is key.
I agree. That transparency is very important. But not only that, structures have to be set up, and I would hope that working with the board, that would happen, because what we do, the communication person, the school has to inform them, even when they call an ambulance. The board receives an email immediately. An ambulance is at, Gadsden High. For this reason, this student, fell out on the playground. So you receive the email immediately, and so that when the ambulance is on its way, you're receiving the email. And so we have found that to really be something that really works for us. It keeps the lines of communication open. I don't know how the structure here works, but, I would be meeting continuously with, the board. I don't know if we have committee meetings, but during those meetings, things, come out about different employees that, beforehand, so you would know all of that. So those type of things, structures are already in place. So I don't know if the structures are in place, but if those structures are in place, that shouldn't occur. But if not, they would be put in place under my administration.
And I want to be honest and transparent too. I feel like in order for you, Dr. Thompson, or any other candidate to succeed as superintendent of Gadsden City Schools, we are going to have to communicate, and we're going to have to set aside our agendas. I'm speaking to all of us, and we're going to have to put the kids first and the children and really focus. I mean, really passionately, with our whole heart, focus on what is most important. And I think that somewhere along the way, we've lost that vision. And I think in order for anyone, for all of us, we want to leave a legacy. We're divinely placed. We're divinely appointed. We want to leave a legacy. So I feel like we need to come together in order to help the superintendent succeed. So that's something that I'm working on myself, and I feel like we as a board need to do that.
And it'll be a constant reminder. You constantly remind us what's our jobs are. When we get off track, what we supposed to be doing.
That is the role of the superintendent.
It is.
It is the role of the superintendent. And I guess I had one more. How do you intend to hold the superintendent accountable for leading and managing the district, mainly to meet the collective expectations? And I guess what I'm saying is almost what Ms. Cochran is saying. The expectations, there are 7 of them. And so those expectations will have to come together and be one in order for it to come to the selected candidate in order to be met. Because it's hard to meet individual desires. So how would you all work towards that, and how does that happen overall?
That would be something that we would have to set as a board, with expectations that we have of you. And that will be provided up front, so that way, as you're being evaluated, you're being evaluated actually on measures that have been set and that you have been made aware of.
Well, thank you. I really do for this opportunity and to be able to be here today. I really consider it an honor and a privilege to have been chosen. As a candidate to interview, and I do appreciate your time and everything that you're for, to be able to say that you are here wanting the best for your district, and I truly believe that. And so I would love to be part of the team to make that happen, to make sure that all individuals, the teachers, the faculty, the staff, the administrators are successful, as well as the students and the community as well. So I do thank you for the opportunity.
And we thank you, Dr. Thomson.
Everyone, we're going to have an opportunity. You have an opportunity to come up and meet Dr. Thomson and say hello to her, let her know who you are and everything. I invite you to come around. And I think they have some refreshments for us back in the back.